Hello, welcome to The Hill. It is 6 o'clock here in Washington, but the question remains tonight, is it time? Is it time for the president to give it up? We are just an hour away from media around the world as they will question the free leader of the world, with the biggest question in this country as the backdrop. What comes next for Joe Biden? Coming up here on The Hill, the president and the press. We are taking you live inside the halls of Congress as more Democrats join the revolt. And we will tell you which 3 states the Biden campaign is describing tonight as critical. And we'll break down the uphill climb for the incumbent who is about to speak before the country. Thanks for being with us on what could be a consequential couple hours here in the race for the biggest prize of them all. This is The Hill on NewsNation. And this is the scene in our nation's capital tonight. Reporters from all over the world here in town for the NATO summit, getting ready to potentially ask President Biden in about 1 hour from now the question that is on their mind, wherever they might be from. U.S. outlets unquestionably wanting to press the president on some variation of these headlines right here. The New York Times reporting tonight that some of the president's advisors are discussing how to convince him to step aside. And the Biden campaign is quietly carrying out Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump polling. The top 2, though, remain adamant tonight. They say nothing will change.
But one thing we know about our president, Joe Biden, is that he is a fighter. And he is the first to say, when you get knocked down, you get back up.
But the president's team is still trying to shore up support. Today, his innermost circle left the West Wing to meet privately with Senate Democrats, a group that is showing both resolve and reservation.
The president's team made a very strong presentation, and I continue to support the re-election of President Biden.
Joe Biden has to go to the American people, not just in one meeting, one press conference, one speech, but consistently and constantly.
Now, the total tonight stands at 15 Democratic lawmakers who have now called on the president to step aside. Politico reports after tonight's press conference, as world leaders leave town, that number could spike if the president has another slip-up. It's not going to be prime time, but it's close. Among the questions tonight, will this press conference be the tipping point for more Democrats who could be ready to say, it is time? We begin tonight with the congressman from the state of North Carolina, the Democrat Wy Nickel. Congressman, thanks for being back with us here on the Hill. Appreciate it. You told me last week you still back the president. Is that where you are this evening? And if so, why?
It is. He's our Democratic nominee, and my focus is doing everything we can to beat Donald Trump. We got to take that message out, and until that changes, my focus is just talking about what a disaster Donald Trump would be for the American people. We saw firsthand today with the NATO 75th anniversary summit what's at stake in this election. If Trump gets to the Oval Office, he will hand Eastern Europe over to Vladimir Putin, his friend, his buddy. There are huge stakes in this election, and I'm rooting for Joe Biden to show he's up to it.
I hear you talk about Donald Trump, and I know you want to talk about Donald Trump, but let's talk for a second about performance today at NATO, which you just raised, because this moment happened within the last, 10, 15 minutes or so, Congressman. I'll get your reaction to the other side, which you are about to listen to if you haven't seen it yet, sir. Is President Biden introducing Vladimir Zelensky? Watch and listen.
Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. We're going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway,
he called Vladimir Zelensky Vladimir Putin. How do you sit there, Congressman, and tell me you have no concerns about his fitness?
I'm not going to tell you I don't have concerns. He's 81 years old, but the only thing I can tell you is, me talking to you, it's not going to put the concerns of the American people to rest. It's Joe Biden showing that he's up to the job. He's been making those verbal gaffes for decades. That one, if you just look at it in isolation, certainly was not helpful.
But this isn't a decades thing. I mean,
the press conference coming up.
Yeah, but that's the problem, right, for Democrats. Doesn't he have to bat 1,000 from here on out? And I wonder, Congressman, how many more that you know of are going to come out against the president after these world leaders start to leave town?
I think you're going to continue to see members of Congress calling on President Biden to step aside. The polling isn't good, but the focus I have is just trying to make the case for why we need to be focusing more on Donald Trump than this issue. And if Joe Biden can't put this issue to bed, I'm going to be one of those folks calling on him to step down too. But I'm hoping that he can. I'm rooting for him. He's someone who has been knocked down before. He's gotten back up. And we're going to continue to see him in action. And the advice I have for the White House and the Biden campaign is to get him out there as much as they can so that folks can see that he is up to the job. And if he can't make that case, it's such an incredibly low bar to show that he's up to the job. Then you're going to continue to hear more folks calling on him to step aside and pass the torch.
So let me ask you this, Congressman, and I'll leave you with this. As you seem to crack the door open there to the possibility of you maybe coming out against him, what is your timeline?
I think, I don't want to jump to, hypotheticals here, but, I know a lot of folks are frustrated with the polling and the debate performance. We got to see the second worst debate performance in American history. Unfortunately, it was overshadowed by the worst debate performance for a presidential campaign with Joe Biden. The stakes are incredibly high. I think a lot of folks like myself are going to be eagerly watching this press conference and other signs. But really, at the end of the day, there's three people that President Biden has to listen to: President Obama, Hakeem Jeffries, and Chuck Schumer. They're gonna make data-driven decisions about what's best for getting control of the House and the Senate. And I am rooting for Joe Biden to continue to show that he is up to the task and that he can do this.
Congressman Wy Nickel, Democrat from the state of North Carolina, thank you for being back with us here on the Hill and answering the question, sir. Appreciate it.
Great to see you, Blake.
You got it. You too. All right. Breaking news tonight from Michael Schnell, our congressional reporter over at the Hill, and what she is hearing now as it relates to Nancy Pelosi. Michael joins us live from our studios just down the road here. Michael, tell me what you're hearing about Nancy Pelosi and what she's doing behind the scenes.
Yeah, Blake. Sources telling myself and my colleague Mike Lillis at the Hill that Nancy Pelosi has been talking to a wide variety of House Democrats behind the scenes, everywhere from people from in safe blue districts to some of those frontliners, to talk about some of her concerns with President Biden at the top of the ticket. And I'm told that this is part of a larger effort to sort of pump the brakes on President Biden's effort to rubber stamp his candidacy and act like the debate didn't happen, that he's definitely the nominee and the candidate going into November. Nancy Pelosi wants to sort of slow things down to make sure that a decision is not made until a broader discussion is had within the caucus and within the party. And look, this may not come as such a surprise, because we heard Pelosi on MSNBC earlier this week saying it's up to President Biden to make the decision here about what he does with his candidacy. Now, that raised some eyebrows because Biden has been adamant on a number of occasions that he's made his decision and is to stay in the race. So sources telling us that Pelosi is trying to slow things down to sort of have this conversation. Blake, it looks like right now more lawmakers are coming out within the past hour or two. We had 3 new House Democrats. I can tell you a lot of lawmakers up on Capitol Hill are going to be watching tonight's press conference very closely to see how the president performs. And if he doesn't perform up to par, it's extremely possible and rather likely that we'll see more House Democrats come out and call on him to withdraw.
All right. Michael Schnell from the Hill. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. All right. Joining me here on the Hill throughout the hour, Aaron Perini is a Republican strategist, Michael Starr Hopkins, a Democratic strategist, Kelly Meyer, of course, NewsNation Washington correspondent, and Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House Chief of Staff, NewsNation contributor. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in. This is going to be a consequential upcoming hours, a couple hours. I think we just laid it out. Mick, let me start with you, because there's all this pressure on the president, right? Let me turn it on its head for a second. He's here in Washington. It's going to happen in the 7 o'clock hour. Presidents, as you know, as a former White House Chief of Staff, get jacked up for stuff like this, where they walk out the door, they see the reporters, they feel like rock stars. And
when you say getting jacked up, are you thinking he's going to be taking drugs? Is that what you're saying on this?
I do not, but I'll leave that. I'm referring to something else. But there's also going to be international media there, right?
Yeah.
And that allows the president to act like a world leader. And when the questions go to international media, it's not going to be, sir, are you too old? It's going to be something about their backyard.
Maybe. Ordinarily, that would be the case. Ordinarily, these are fixed pieces. Okay, after the State of the Union, the most controlled environment that a president would sort of face the press would be at these international conferences.
Right.
Because what happens is that the White House will pick one or two. They call them two of twos, right? There's two people on stage. They pick who the two reporters are. They approve the questions, or at least the subject matter of the questions. That's not what's happening tonight. So your premise is sort of, well, if you're a reporter from France, you're only going to care about NATO. I don't think so. I think the whole world is watching tonight. And if for some reason he doesn't get a question tonight about his ability, he's going to be criticized for that. So is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. He has to address it tonight.
So as a former White House chief of staff, right now, you're prepping Joe Biden. How? What's this White House doing to try to make it the most successful event for him if possible? Knowing the stakes, knowing the pressure.
I don't know if it's a fair question, because if I'm the White House chief of staff, I'm the person who's told him already that we shouldn't be doing this, Mr. President. We need to figure out a way to leave gracefully. But if you force me to do it, I'm like, Mr. President, look, short answers, don't wander, move around, question to question, don't droll on for 4 minutes at a time. Quick, pithy answers. Let's get through the hour as much as we possibly can. It's already been delayed by half an hour in its start. So maybe they have an 8 o'clock hard stop and they won't do 90 minutes. They'll only do 60. That might be by design.
Yeah. Kelly, 14 lawmakers now. You just heard from Wy Nickel there. Yeah. I think I heard like a little bit of wiggle room, right? Yeah. And so how many more lawmakers are right there, especially after, my gosh, those Putin comments from the president? Because as someone, I think Michael said the other day, he's got about 1,000 from here on out every single day. How many more Wy Nickels are there out there?
I mean, they've been, it didn't sound like a big endorsement or for him to go out there, what we just heard on the interview, just saying basically, I'm rooting for him to do better, but it wasn't just, I'm behind him no matter what. I think there are a lot of people that we've heard from behind the scenes that have said, that I've heard from personally, that said even just after the debate, there really wasn't, even that interview we looked towards on Friday, they said it's done. It has to happen. So I think we're going to see more and more come out over the next 24 hours.
So it was pretty remarkable today because, and you both have worked up on the Hill, extensive experience. The president sent his innermost circle up to Capitol Hill today to lunch with Senate Democrats. Do you think there are some Senate Democrats who are a little peeved, Aaron, that the president himself hasn't gone there? And how does that play into this scenario?
Absolutely. Mick and I were discussing this, and I've had the privilege of working for 2 senators. They would feel incredibly disrespected that the president, who was a senator, who was the vice president, who was the president of the Senate, who understands kind of the grandeur that they hold within themselves as the upper chamber, they would feel so disrespected that even if it was his inner circle, even if it was his best friend from childhood, the fact that the president, who was a senator, is not here talking to them, that would make them very upset. And I'm actually a little surprised that you're not hearing any more consternation about that, because that's actually a huge backhand to the
Well, it's also NATO, though. I think he also couldn't have been there.
He could, but maybe you couldn't have done it today, but he could have done it at any other time. But he thinks that sending his staff will handle this. That is going to upset more senators.
Let me ask you this. As a Democratic strategist, testing if the New York Times, you want to...
No, I'm sorry to interrupt. Aaron just said something really insightful, that sending the staff to anybody would think would fix this makes me come back to the question of who's making the decisions. That's the type of mistake that somebody who doesn't understand Washington makes. That's the kind of mistake that a Jill Biden or a Hunter Biden make. That's not a mistake that Jeff Zients works on the Hill. That's exactly right. Jeff Zients would never make that mistake. So it goes again to who is actually running the building,
making the decisions. What I was going to ask you was this New York Times reporting that they're testing Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump. Is that just what you do as a campaign? Is that a little... it's CYA, or is it actually showing that things are much worse behind the scenes than we are led to believe. Where are you on that as a Democratic strategist?
Yeah, I mean, things are moving pretty quickly now. I was talking to a couple of CBC members who are very,
caucus.
Yeah, who are very pro-Biden, very supportive of the president, but privately are saying that in the coming days there's going to be movement. People don't want to make a lot of the commentary during NATO, but the second NATO closes, that there's going to be a fire hose that gets opened. And when you saw the president make that comment about President Putin,
right,
that's painful. Like, people really are not enjoying, and it's heartbreaking to see kind of him struggle, and to see that moment of him realizing what he had just said. People want to put an end to this.
Yep. All right, still to come here on the Hill, as we are now about, give or take, somewhere in the area of 45, 50 minutes until the president and the press. The Biden campaign outlining today which they view as the three most critical states to win in November. We will show you those battleground states, the numbers, and the live odds of him actually pulling it off. And it could be one of the most consequential moments of the year as Democrats continue to call on the president to step aside. The president, the press, questions and concerns. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation, as we are now roughly 45 minutes or so until President Biden's press conference, which will be closely watched as more Democrats call for him to drop out of the race. Now, tonight, there are two new polls that you can key in on. One shows that Donald Trump leads nationally by 3, and in the other, Trump and Biden are tied. But there is a clear feeling about the incumbent. According to a Washington Post ABC News poll, 2/3 of voters think President Biden should step aside, and that includes 73% of independents. A reading from Pew Research also shows the peril for the president. Just 24% feel he is now mentally sharp. And as you can see there, that is down 29 points since the start of his term. Scott Traynor is the data science director with our partners at Decision Desk HQ. Joins us live here on The Hill. All right, Scott, those polls coming in, those numbers. Your read on it tonight is?
Look, in this polarized environment, very rarely do we get bipartisan agreement, and that's what those two polls show. They agree. They show that, by and large, voters think that Joe Biden's not necessarily fit to be president, and that, you know, those numbers have been going down over the past 3 years. So that's not the trend line that the Biden campaign needs to see going into this fall.
All right, so the Biden campaign today, Scott, they wrote this in a memo, and they made it public. They sent it out. They said, quote, "We have multiple pathways to 270 electoral votes, but we know that Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin are critical to victory, which is why we're investing heavily there, and President Biden has prioritized the region over the past week." That from the campaign today. All right, so the DDHQ model, which you run, here's where things stand. The president, according to your model, has a 55% chance of winning the state of Michigan. We're keying in on those 3 states. While Donald Trump has a 55% chance of winning Pennsylvania and a 57% chance of winning Wisconsin. So, Scott, if those are the critical states for the president, as his team says it is, what does it mean for his chances?
Look, it's an uphill battle for Biden. Let's just take the numbers of where they are. Let's assume that Joe Biden wins Michigan and Donald Trump wins those other 2 states. Based on how the map is, the model says that Donald Trump would have a 96% chance of winning the presidency at that point. And that's simply because those 3 states, they're critical for Joe Biden, but they're not necessarily as critical for Donald Trump because of how well he's doing in other states like Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia.
So he essentially, is it like running an inside straight?
That's exactly what this is. And you know what? Inside straights are hard to get, and that's what Biden needs.
Scott Traynor from Decision Desk HQ, breaking up there, but we thank you for your time, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you, Scott. We'll catch you soon. If Donald Trump wins just Pennsylvania, according to these models, Nick, he has an 86% shot of winning.
You know, Michael and I were talking last night after the show, and I thought he said something that was really insightful, which was he's looking closer, and you talked about this, at Arizona and Nevada than Michigan and Pennsylvania. Because Michigan, Pennsylvania, Michael
okay.
Starr Hopkins.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Okay.
Simply because, and I'll let him explain it himself, those states are going to be tight. They are. Arizona and Nevada are not supposed to be tight. And right now, Trump is up 5 or 6 or 7 points in those states. That, to me, speaks as much about where this race is headed as what we've just talked about.
Yeah, I mean, he's running. You've got Ruben Gallego, who's a veteran, who's Latino, who's running against Kari Lake, someone who's very unpopular. And then in Nevada, you've got, Horford, who's the head of the CBC, Congressional Black Caucus, in that state. And you've got Democrats severely underperforming there. It's key. I've talked about Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. If Democrats can't win Arizona, then that's really the bellwether for our chances on election night.
Especially for down ballot.
Yeah.
Right. Because if they're losing in Arizona, you don't have to. Yeah, exactly.
But so then when I look at those other 3 states, though, Aaron, and if is it just as simple for Donald Trump as, and obviously we don't know, things can change, but win Pennsylvania or win Wisconsin and it's done?
I think if he picks off one of these 3, I think Wisconsin and Pennsylvania are going to be the bigger ones for him to get. I don't necessarily, yes, Michigan's moving into the toss-up category. That still feels like that's the toughest of these 3 to win. Right. But if you're looking at the map, you take Wisconsin or Pennsylvania, I mean, those are true swing states. Yeah. And let me tell you, this is an on year in Wisconsin. I've done 2 cycles in that state. This is a state that tends to trend blue in on cycle years and presidential years. That's why you went from Ron Johnson in 2010 to Tammy Baldwin in 2012. And so to see it trending blue or to see it trending red right now, that should be putting up warning sirens for Democrats.
All right, quick commercial break here on the Hill. We are about 35 minutes or so away until the commander-in-chief faces off with the media. All eyes here in Washington and, quite frankly, many all across this country tuning in tonight to watch. Will he hold up? Will he silence his critics? How many more Democrats are going to leave his side? You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. A live look right now at Capitol Hill, where President Biden's top aides, including the head of his re-election campaign, met with Democratic senators behind closed doors earlier today. This after the first Senate Democrat announced last night that the president should step aside in the race. Running through the hallways once again for us, Joe Khalil, live from Capitol Hill. Joe, I wonder from your perch today what that was like and what you heard from these Democratic senators after the president himself didn't go, rather he sent the aides in.
Yeah, from my sources, what I'm hearing is that at times the meeting was productive and going well, but at times it was also downright tense and uncomfortable, is the word I heard from a source. And we've also been told that this meeting, nearly everybody stood up as senators came out. There was a mix of perspectives, but I'm told nobody felt leaving today like Democrats still didn't have a big unsolved problem on their hands. Take a listen.
Some of my concerns are allayed. Some others have been deepened. I need more of the kind of analytics that show the path to success. More important than my concerns are the questions that have been raised by the American people.
Do you think senators' concerns were allayed in there?
I think people are still talking. We obviously have some different perspectives about how best to proceed. But again, the president's team made a very strong presentation, and I continue to support the re-election of President Biden.
So, Blake, just some of the campaign points they tried to put forward are the polling isn't necessarily as bad as we thought it might be. And looking at alternatives, we'd have no one else, no other Democrat that polls as well as Joe Biden, at least no evidence of that so far. That's the case the campaign tried to make today.
But that's dumping on Kamala Harris, is it not, Joe?
Well, I mean, it's not a whole lot of faith in her, nor is it faith in many of the deep bench that Democrats celebrate quite often either.
Yep. All right, Joe K, live for us in the Capitol hallways. Joe, thank you, appreciate it. That's like, if you make that side, if you make heads, there's tails.
Yeah.
And the tails there is saying that the vice president can't stand up to the challenge.
Yeah, and there's a lot of frustration within her camp as well as within the CBC talking about that exact issue. Whenever Joe Biden says, I'm the only person that can beat Donald Trump, but there's no one else that's best positioned to do this, well, that's a knock on his vice president. His vice president is well positioned to take on Trump, and actually a lot of polling indicates that she may be in a better position.
It's only a knock if he's actually backing down, and it's only a knock if he actually thinks that he's going to step away and she's going to become become either the president or become the nominee.
Because he's fighting for his political life right now, so he's like, I am the only one. The two things I was going to say is, 2020 and 2024 are very different. I know we were talking yesterday about the support outside of the Beltway, the enthusiasm for Trump. I've seen it. I've talked to voters when we were on the campaign trail. It's just different. And I think there's also, economy, immigration. It's not the same race that you're fighting this time. And I think it's just interesting, to see Blumenthal come out there. I was just going to say, you have the White House. I was there today. You have the White House spokesperson going on Twitter and trying to refute these headlines that are coming out. And then you have a person at the same time coming out and saying, yeah, we have concerns. You can't just tell people to look away anymore.
That's what the real world isn't on social media.
Yeah.
Right. So the White House can try to fight this fight on social media all it wants, Kelly, but that's telling people not to believe what they see with their own eyes.
Right.
There are concerns about Donald Trump continuously attacking the VP, though, and there not being enough of a defense.
See, Michael, I don't put much weight in this Biden versus Harris thing, because it's the kind of stuff that goes away.
Absolutely.
On day one. It just, no one remembers it. It's not the kind of stuff that ends up in a Republican ad against Kamala Harris if she's the candidate anyway. So I hear what you're saying. It's sort of a diss. But it's the type of thing that is easily smoothed.
It is, and as hurt feelings continue to be kind of examined, I think it's something that will go away. But right now, I think there's a lot of Democrats that are upset with the administration for a lot of reasons.
All right, well, after George Clooney's scathing op-ed in the New York Times calling for President Biden to drop out of the race, we are now hearing, or at least there is reporting, that the former president, Barack Obama, was aware ahead of the time and did not object to that op-ed. Politico reporting that the A-list actor reached out to the former president to give him a heads up. Now, Clooney, as you might remember, hosted the Hollywood fundraiser last month, raised some $30 million. He wrote in the op-ed, and this was the viral moment of it when President Obama led President Biden off stage. George Clooney writing the following in that op-ed, quote, "He wasn't even the Joe Biden of 2020. But the most notable moment, of course, that right there." What do you make of this idea? I'm not sure it's an idea, that if George Clooney did that, Barack Obama knew and thus gave him either the silent or the metaphorical thumbs up.
I mean, there's already, it's been reported that there are frustrations between the Obama camp and the Biden camp, especially on the Biden side. But I think what you're really seeing here is a recognition. President Obama kind of stopped the slow drip for a moment there. There were a lot of potential Democrats going to come out and speak out.
He put a statement out the day after or 2 days after, sort of right after the debate.
And it was a subtle move, but I think he wanted to give Biden the chance to see if he could survive and be able to, fix things. It's clear that that's what's not going to happen. And so what you're not seeing now is President Biden come out and double down on that statement.
I will say, though, there's always been a divide between the Obama-Biden camps.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, Obama told Biden not to run in the first place. Mm-hmm. He encouraged him not to. And geopolitically, they have been kind of going at each other behind the scenes for a long time, especially about the way he's been handling Ukraine and Israel. So the fact that Obama even maybe quietly did not discourage George Clooney from doing this, politically speaking, being a political insider doesn't surprise me at all.
Right. So there's the question, right? If you saw this then, why didn't you say anything? Right? And I've been asking this question to lawmakers who have come on this show for a week.
Ask it of the media.
So one of Barack Obama's former top speechwriters who was there at the event said the following earlier today on television. Watch.
It was not surprising to any of us who were at the fundraiser. I was there. Clooney was exactly right. And every single person I talked to at the fundraiser thought the same thing, except for the people working for Joe Biden, or at least they didn't say that. But I remember my wife, Emily, turned to me after the fundraiser and said, "What are we going to do?"
So is that, and then he went on to basically allude to, the idea that there was a debate in a few weeks, and I guess you could say, well, maybe let's see how he performs at the debate. But is that acceptable for those who were at that fundraiser to now?
Yeah, one of my takeaways from that is I thought Jon Favreau was the guy from the Avengers movie, so I'm just sort of putting it all together. Look, ask it of everybody who was there. Okay, ask it of Chuck Todd, who went public this morning and said that he had talked to a cabinet secretary months or even years ago who said that didn't even think that Biden was up to the job back then. Why the silence? I mean, we need the media to be a responsible sort of investigator of both parties. You can't pick sides to the point where you're willing to ignore really, really hard truths, which is what's at the core of what we're going through right now.
And I have a lot of respect for the White House press corps. I've worked with them. I know that these are a lot of professionals. They do their job. I have a lot of respect for the Hill press corps. There is a traveling press corps that goes with the president. people likely saw something and weren't talking about, like, what did the White House press corps know? Because I haven't heard anything from the Correspondents Association to say we were misled and put in the dark as well. And that is going to discredit media more to the American people when they already have a large distrust.
So George Clooney comes out with this. I wonder who had the worst 24 hours in Hollywood after George Clooney came forward with this. Can you think of a name?
Alec Baldwin?
He's had a rough 24 hours. How about this guy right here? Could you imagine being Robert De Niro over the last 24 hours? The Biden campaign puts him out there.
I have forgotten all about this.
This was May 20-something. He goes out there, vouches for Biden, and then George Clooney
blows it up.
Blows it all up.
Have they ever been in a movie together?
That's what I was just wondering. Which one would they do?
I don't think anything.
They run in the same circle.
They have to redo the Odd Couple.
Him and Marty are close.
All right. Coming up here on The Hill and on NewsNation over the next couple of hours, we are awaiting the President of the United States, set to speak at 7 o'clock Eastern as he faces one of the biggest challenges of his career. This moment here, by the way, just moments ago, the president introducing the leader of Ukraine as President Putin. He obviously backtracked. The microscope is on him, and he will speak to the media in minutes. You're watching The Hill. A press conference at the NATO summit just down the road from us here in Washington. The House Speaker Mike Johnson saying earlier today, according to him, that some world leaders are uneasy about the commander-in-chief's ability to lead.
Foreign leaders are coming in, prime ministers, heads of state, and they are telling us privately that they're deeply concerned. They need a strong man in the White House because we have to project strength. That's how we maintain peace.
You buying this there from the speaker?
Absolutely. I absolutely believe that there would be a world leader that would tell the speaker behind closed doors that he or she has concerns about the president.
Ooh, you don't
I
think
don't know.
so?
Mick might disagree.
No, I'm going to disagree with it for a different reason.
Okay, but
finish your thought.
I mean, I don't think that the speaker gains anything by making this story up when world leaders are just going to walk around and say it's not true if they get asked.
Never would have said it.
Never would have said that?
Never would have said it.
Why?
I think that's a rookie mistake.
Why?
If you're a world leader, what are you going to do next time you go into to the speaker's office behind closed doors?
Not tell him.
You don't give that kind of stuff. And by the way, it doesn't move the needle, right? It doesn't. It's piling on at this point. If Biden's going to succeed or fail based upon his own actions, it doesn't add to the debate to say, oh, the world leaders are worried about Joe Biden. We're worried about Joe Biden. I'm not trying to convince anybody right now that he's not up to the job. So listen, I like Mike. I think he's doing a tremendous job under miserable circumstances. I think that was a rookie mistake.
By the way, as we sit here on Thursday night, Donald Trump has a decision to make. Either Friday,
red tie or blue tie,
Saturday or Sunday to unveil it before they have to put the nomination officially forth on Monday because it's the RNC convention. What do you think it's going to be?
I've been trying to find an insight. So here's the crystal ball. What's the biggest podium, the biggest stage he can find between now and Monday? And I don't see it. I don't think he's got a rally planned this weekend. Does he really?
That's what I was going to say.
Okay, so where is he going?
The Butler, Pennsylvania one, what we were talking about the other day, I think that's the one where he may do it, especially since it's near Ohio.
Introduce the person there.
I think he waits until the convention. I think he's going to do it at the convention.
So he has to
walk them out WWF.
But nobody watches the convention on Monday. And he has to get
maybe they will now.
So RNC rules, and you and I kind of talked about this earlier this week, and I looked into a little bit. RNC rules say by convention it has to be named. However, RNC rules are easy to move. They could easily go back and say, we've decided it's Wednesday, and it can be Wednesday, and that could be how it works.
That's true.
If he does like the rose ceremony and stuff.
I fully expect him to have multiple people there expecting to be the VP and him to walk one out Vince McMahon style. He is the Vince McMahon of politics. He loves showmen.
Give me a name. Who do you think it's going to be?
I'm going to give you a new name. You know, I've been out there with J.D. Vance. I've been out there with Ben Carson. I'm going to go with Kristi Noem.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think they're expecting Kamala Harris to be at the top of the ticket. I think they're going to need a woman on the ticket. I think Kristi goes back onto the list, despite the fact that she had the difficulty with shooting a pet.
Give me a name.
I mean, if we're going to go for like wild cards right now, I would say Sarah Sanders. I think that she would be a better fit for the ticket than Kristi.
She was on my list as well.
By the way, speaking of the Republican National Convention,
ask the Democrat first what he thinks.
What do you think it's going to be?
Doug Burgum. I've always said it's going to be Doug Burgum. It's what I think.
You got a hunch or no?
I just think unless he's trying to do bait and switch, all the signs look like Vance. If he's going to announce it on Saturday, it's near the border of Ohio.
Right.
Yeah, I just think it might be Vance.
I forgot about that.
By the way, speaking of the convention, which starts on Monday, the mayor of East Palestine, Trent Conaway, now saying today that he is going to be speaking at the RNC this week. You can expect that, a major story that we covered hour after hour, day after day, week after week, month after month here on NewsNation. The mayor of that town is going to be throwing his hat behind Donald Trump. All right. Meantime, did you see this? A Milwaukee radio station now admitting to editing an interview with President Biden before air after his campaign wanted 2 segments cut. The president says in one of those clips taken out, quote, "I have more blacks in my administration than any other president. All other presidents combined and in major cabinet positions," end quote. The station says it fell short of its journalistic standards and is making the full interview available. Let's show the live pictures real quick, by the way, because they just popped up, which means the media normally gets taken out of the room for a little bit of a sweep. They're brought back in, and we get the live pictures as the president is about to speak at this news conference, give or take 12 to 15 minutes time. The reason why we bring this up, Michael, is because the White House / campaign, we've seen this now. They suggested questions to radio hosts. Answers edited. Even the Stephanopoulos interview with Biden was tweaked afterwards when there were some questions about what he may or may not have said. Are they able to hide him here? And if so, how?
So the manipulating of questions, it's normal for comm staff to ask about topics, to kind of suggest questions, ideas, but to actually ask them to edit out something specific like that, like they know they're going to get caught. So the question becomes, why do something? They do.
No, see, but I think this goes back to
but he's under so much scrutiny.
It's a no offense. It's a Democrat mentality. They've been getting away with this for years. Go back to what they did in the Hunter Biden laptop. That they never got caught doing this stuff. Now, because the scrutiny is so high, it's starting to come out. But they're looking around, going, "Wait a second. The media was supposed to be on our side. They're not supposed to."
This is just messy. It's heavy-handed, and it reinforces the narrative that he can't do these interviews without them basically propping him up.
So back to my question. How do they protect him here, or can they not?
If I was them, I wouldn't have done this. Like, I think that the idea that he's going to be able to stand up there for 60 and 90 minutes and not have...
You think it's going to be that long?
He's got to do an hour.
Yeah, anything short of an hour, and it looks like it was just kind of a fake opportunity, a TV opportunity that they just were checking a box off. I don't know how he has a win here.
Would you have advised him to do this?
No.
You used to speak for a former president on the other side of the aisle.
I did.
Would you have advised, if you flipped to the other side of the aisle, would you have told him to do this?
No, I would have said absolutely not. This is not where you should be. Joe does pretty well at the rallies. He does pretty well in larger public appearances because it can be...
On prompter.
On prompter. It's much safer for him. A freewheeling press conference with the global press corps is not going to right the ship for him. He does one-on-one interviews, and those aren't helping. Getting peppered with questions is setting him up for catastrophic failure.
It goes back to the same conversation we had about sending the staff down to the Senate.
Yes.
This is the decision made by folks who don't know what they're doing, which makes me wonder again, who is the inner circle? Is the family really taken over? Who, listen, they've been around Washington their whole lives, but this is a business, right? You know how to do this. There's mistakes you make, you learn and so forth, but this looks like the amateur team saying, "Oh, no, we got a great idea. We're going to do this at NATO. He's going to look like a world leader. It's going to be great. No one's going to ever ask any questions about this because they're all going to want to know about Ukraine."
Right.
And if he pivots and tries to say, "I want to keep the focus on NATO," this explodes all over.
So Kelly can back me up here as a correspondent and as someone who covered the White House and traveled the world to these things. What reporters are doing now, Kelly, is fine-tuning every question and trying to figure out, all right, if these questions are asked right off the top, then I'm going to go to these questions down here, kind of a thing.
Absolutely. I think that's exactly it. They're going to be going through it. They have questions ready. If the first row asks some questions and then he makes it to the next row, I'm watching to see how long he goes with this, how many people he calls on, who he calls on. If he does go around and make this a random, I'm going to call on you like Trump would do if he came out in the press briefing room and call on whoever in the back row, or if he keeps it to the first 2 rows and then leaves. I just think what I was going to add to what Mick was saying is that it seems like the White House is taking the bait here. The Democrats were calling for him to do more unscripted moments, get out there, get on the road, do sit-down interviews. He did ABC. He's now going to do NBC. They're feeding right into what everybody's wanting, but I don't know whether or not.
So we have done these, Mick, on both ends, right? As a correspondent, I remember being in Finland, being in the room with Vladimir Putin, and being, oh my gosh, this is going to be my one shot potentially at asking a question to Vladimir Putin. And I think you'll have the international media. I know. You'll have the international media in town thinking, oh my gosh, this is my one shot. at interviewing or asking a question of the leader of the free world, the president of the United States. So that's from our vantage point, from your vantage point as a former chief of staff. It's what?
I'm scared to death of those questions because, again, if you make an assumption for sake of discussion that there's an amateur group of people advising the president right now, that they've taken the professionals and moved them out, okay, what they don't realize is the French reporter is not going to ask a question about the F-16s that are going to Ukraine. No. The French reporter is going to get famous if he or she is the person who asked the question that ends up taking down the president.
You don't think they'll ask about Le Pen or something like that?
No, I really don't. I think maybe later on, but if you were a reporter and if the president of China was having a really, really rough go and is in this sort of thing, and you had a chance to ask one question, would you ask about a domestic policy thing, or would you ask what the whole world is talking about?
It depends where in the order, and if it's been asked and answered. This is everything that's gamed out.
With all the questions that are being asked about how prepared or he isn't, or if he's getting questions ahead, I'm going to be wondering if he pulls a card out of his pocket that lists names and photos and questions, because we've seen a lot of that from this White House.
All right, Leland Vittert joins us on the other side of the break. Stay with us, minutes away. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. As we've been talking about all hour, we are just moments away until this major press conference with President Biden just down the road from us here in Washington, as all eyes in this town and many eyes all across this country are wondering what the president will say, what he will do, and how he will perform, as more Democrats today have come out and called for him to step aside. Leland Vittert, host of On Ballots.
I'll add one thing to that, which is people around the world. And I think that we perhaps are underestimating, we just saw the pool shot go down there, the significance and the seriousness and gravity of the situation, that the world is watching a president of the United States, the leader of the free world, clearly not on his A game. And that is not good for America.
And we just saw moments ago, or an hour ago, another disastrous clip from